Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Today, we're going to look at this podcast called Eat the Rules with Summer. She has on this episode a guest named Danny, and they are both body image coaches that are going to be discussing what happens or what to do when their clients want to lose weight. I thought it would be interesting. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, let's use that as a segue to talking about our central conversation, which stems from both of these things that we're seeing in culture recently in the media. And that's helping people who are still, wanting to lose weight or questioning it. Why do people want to lose weight? I mean, I think that's the first question to ask ourselves, whether it's like you're an individual struggling with this, like, why do you want to lose weight? What do you think that will give you? Or if you're a provider who works with somebody, like, why do you think people want to lose weight?
So there's a lot of different reasons why people want to lose weight. I would think that when you're older, and when I say older, I don't mean like super old, but 25 plus. Okay, so when you're more in that range, you typically want to lose weight because of health reasons or because of inaccessibility to certain things. So whether that's like going upstairs, going downstairs, sleeping comfortably, for some people having children, right? There could be fertility issues in regards to that. There's usually, you start thinking about mortality more, especially as you get into your 30s, right? Especially if you're very, very big. So I would say that's probably like the number one reason. I think a lot of people who have been very fat for a very long time, they tend to experience health issues post 25 as well, where it can be a little scary. And so they typically want to start losing weight or start pursuing health because they don't want to die. So that's what I would say is the number one reason why people start trying to lose weight. When you're younger or maybe less big, it can tend to have to do with dating options or just image in general, which I still think is somewhat relevant. I think there's nothing wrong with wanting to make yourself more attractive to appeal to more people that you're attracted to, right? I know that this is often demonized a lot in modern culture, but there's nothing wrong with trying to improve yourself in various areas to be more successful in the dating market or in pursuing a relationship or these types of things. I myself, I would say that there's a lot of physical barriers to obesity, especially super morbid obesity. There's a lot of just not feeling at peace in your own skin. And by that, I mean due to illness, okay? Both physical and mental, that goes along with obesity. I want to be able to breathe easy, quite literally. I want to have a longer life. And I also want to not have the social barriers of being obese at all. I think it's incredibly frustrating in the dating market to be fat. I think it's incredibly frustrating within career aspects, or especially I want to make YouTube my career, which YouTube is an image-based thing. So anything that's more image-based, being fat does hold you back as well. And I think it's important just to acknowledge these things because being obese is not healthy. And most people are not going to see it as desirable or promote it as such. There are, of course, niche people, and there are people who can break through in terms of getting famous or popular while they're overweight or being very attractive to specific niche. Somebody critiqued my pronunciation of that word, but specific niche groups. There are a lot of people that are very attractive to like big, beautiful women, so to speak, right? But I never wanted to break into something like that because it can give you disastrous incentives to stay obese even against your health, which we've seen mukbangers struggle with health, and that's very scary. So I never wanted to have that incentive to be in those types of situations, because I always knew that it wasn't healthy, because I was always really big and I pretty much always had health issues in regards to obesity, and I knew it was never sustainable. So I would say that's why I spent a lot of time figuring out how to lose weight, because I wanted to live more than anything. I just wanted to live. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable request. You know, I got to be super morbidly obese because I had a severe BED, and I don't want that to shorten my life, end my life, damage my life any more than it already has. And there's no reason why I should have to suffer the rest of my life because of something I struggled deeply with due to childhood trauma as a teenager and somebody in my early 20s. So that's why I want to lose weight, and that's why people want to lose weight. But let's see what they will say.
Why do you think people want to lose weight?
I was going to ask you that same question. Like, why do you think that, like, people are losing weight?
I mean, I got lots of thoughts. I think it's like exactly what we were talking about, right? Like, it's privilege. It's like proximity to privilege, whether that be beauty privilege, white privilege, thin privilege, class privilege, age privilege. Like, it's all of those things are.
Age privilege makes zero sense. Neither does white privilege in this context. When it comes to beauty privilege, I could see that. Sure. I think if you are pretty or if you look good, why should you look worse? Just to appease you? Why should you throw that away? You know, we're all born in this world with assets and liabilities. Why shouldn't people try to look their best? Or why shouldn't people try to work with what God gave them, so to speak? Why shouldn't people do that? Why is that shameful to you? And why would you shame somebody for doing that? I don't understand the current societal concept of hating on beauty. You know, I'm not one to have extremely narrow views of beauty or anything like that. I think there is truth to the fact that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But something like health is pretty much universally beautiful. And there's no problem with that. I think that's actually a very positive incentive to live a longer, healthier life. So I don't understand why this movement is constantly wanting everybody to cut themselves off at the knees. And then they try to bring in like capitalism, race, sexism. You know, they try to bring in all these buzzwords to essentially convince you to accept less in your life, to try to convince you to accept barriers that do not have to be there. You don't have to be fat. You don't.
What drive our desire to lose weight. And I think that on an individual level, on the surface, that shows up as oftentimes wanting to just be more, socially acceptable or attractive or receive validation. And it can also show up as.
So notice they do not at all acknowledge health whatsoever. I think one of my biggest criticisms of fat acceptance is they tend to talk about it, and body positivity even. They tend to talk about weight as if people are always only ever 20 to 30 pounds overweight. That somebody's only ever losing weight purely to get abs. And there's nothing wrong with getting abs. I think that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with not having abs either, right? I only pressure people to, for men, get to a body fat of around 25%, technically lower than that, so 24%. And for women to get to at least 31% body fat. But if you could get to under 30, that would be even better. You know, not everybody has to go for peak fitness like I do. Like I want to. I want to get to 17, which for a male, that is fit. That's where I want to be. I want to for whatever reasons I want, but mostly because like in the sense that I don't have to justify it to you. But I want it because, one, why shouldn't I look good? Two, I have put my body through hell being super morbidly obese throughout my entire 20s and high school, half of high school. There's no reason for me not to put myself in the best position possible for the rest of my life to be as fit as I can be so that I can minimize the damage that has already been done. So I'm not going to go for just the average body type. I'm going to go for a fit body type for those reasons. And that's my right. And if I'm dedicated and if I want to do that, then I can. And I should get the rewards, both health and societal, that come with it. Absolutely.
Like wanting to gain access to things. So for some people, it's a matter of having access to life-saving surgery or gender-affirming surgery or fertility treatments.
Or it can be access to just being fertile without any of that. It could be access to being able to breathe.
Healthcare. And so I think that it's not just about aesthetics. It's about proximity to privilege. And for some people,
it's about health. They don't ever consider that.
That's going to show up more as wanting just more social currency. And for others, it's really tied to the fact that there's so much bias in healthcare and that it can be unsafe to be to be fat if you are being denied healthcare. And so wanting to have that.
Yes, it's very unsafe to be fat. It is. I think we have a lot of fat acceptance, especially in America, and it needs to stop because it's not okay. It's very unhealthy. It greatly reduces your quality of life. Whether you go to a doctor or not, it still affects you. No matter what race you are, no matter what sex you are, no matter what gender you identify as, none of this matters. If you are super morbidly obese, it will cause you problems, and it is dangerous. Absolutely. Even obesity in general is not safe. It's just less unsafe. It's less risky than being super morbidly obese. That's all.
Safety, wanting to have that access, it makes sense to me why somebody would want to lose weight.
Yeah.
As somebody who's been super morbidly obese, I understand how unsafe you can feel in your body when you're at this size. I was almost 400 pounds. I felt very unsafe for quite a long time. I feared the end of my life for particularly a year in 2021 because it was so bad during that time. So yes, it is unsafe. Absolutely. And to have seen fat acceptance activists and mukbangers that have died at the ages of 28, 33, 37, right? These very, very young ages. Yeah, it's scary. It's very, very unsafe. Absolutely.
I was going to bring that up because I think about the first time I ever heard about like obesity, I was in elementary school and public health professionals came to my class and told us there's a crisis. And people are dying from this thing called obesity, and you don't want to be it. And this is your chart, and you need to eat in this chart, and this is how much you need to exercise. And you need to stop. I remember them saying, you need to stop watching television while you're eating. Like there was all these different things. And every semester, there was a public health professional coming to my school talking to us about it. And so
I think that a lot of people who haven't been fat, they try to think of solutions to help people who have been fat. And that's why I try to speak on this issue as somebody that has a lot of experience with obesity, because I want you guys to understand, like, telling somebody not to eat while watching TV is not helpful. It doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. But I understand that a lot of people who have been thin their whole life, they try to come up with solutions, and a lot of the diet advice is not that helpful. And I try to shed light on what has actually helped, especially from a super morbidly obese perspective. I try. That's what this channel is about. Okay, so I agree that the advice is not necessarily that great or meaningful a lot of the time, especially in the 2000s, which I'm guessing that's what she's talking about here. That's a very 2000s coded thing to say. But just because diet and weight loss attempts or ideas in the 2000s didn't work doesn't mean that we shouldn't just change some things and change the mindset and change even certain steps within losing weight in the 2020s to get this issue resolved. That's what we should be doing. We don't always have to go back to the past. We can move forward and do things in a new way.
That is the beginning of the indoctrination, I believe. And so a lot of people, even as they grow older, like, oh, I have sleep apnea. I was tested for sleep apnea earlier this year, and they have this new at-home sleep apnea test. But based on my size, they were like, oh, yeah, you have a sleeping disorder. And the only way that you can get rid of this sleeping disorder if you lose weight. One is I got retested. I don't have sleep apnea. But, that's...
Not yet. Always an asterisk. Not yet. You could develop it at any time, and you likely will develop health issues. This person is definitely overweight, but I'm just saying they always think that they're fine until they're not. I did have some health issues in my early 20s. Like I got a lot of migraines. I had a lot of high blood pressure episodes when I was 21, for example. I remember specifically at that time, I started to question my own mortality, which is incredibly young to have to think about these things, especially, and that's typical in a super morbidly obese person because you do suffer health issues. But when I was in high school, I felt fine. I didn't think about it. When I was fat, when I was in middle school, I didn't think about it. I was fine. It was all about social stuff. And I understand that a lot of people, they don't necessarily have as severe of BED as what I had. But I experienced a lot of these health issues sooner because my BED was so severe. So most people, it takes longer to have these issues, especially I find a lot of women, they can last a bit longer. I think because their bodies can handle higher estrogen than male bodies can for a longer period of time. And being obese is so estrogenic in general. So I think that is definitely an aspect that a lot of women don't necessarily consider too. Like just because your body can handle it for longer doesn't mean that it can completely handle it. Your heart will still struggle. There's still issues that are developing slowly over time. Even if, for me as a male, it hit me faster because estrogen is so caustic to a male body. That doesn't mean that it's not going to affect you too. I saw this one person, I think that's a mukbanger, and she talked about how she developed cancer around the age of 25 because her estrogen was so elevated because of obesity. So this does affect women as well. I just think that a lot of women don't necessarily feel the effects as quickly as men do.
The way that people are engaged by the medical professionals. So I can see why even some people who even don't want the quest for thinness are saying, I don't want to die. And I think that we can't criticize people for wanting to lose weight individually because we have not created the alternative system that we dream of. I do not know, I'm not a medical professional, right? I do not know what to tell someone who's saying, okay, I have this chronic illness. My doctor said I need to lose weight in order to get rid of this chronic illness. I don't feel comfortable as a body image coach to say, don't lose that weight. I think we have to make room. We have to make grace for.
At least they're saying that. That's good.
Real life experiences that people are having, for the fact that we haven't built this beautiful world that we want to build where people's weight isn't a qualifier for their ability to thrive. We haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you'll never get there because physical reality exists and there are limits within a human body. What a human body can do. A human body cannot handle being 3, 4, 5, 600 pounds indefinitely. It's damaging to the body to be that size, and it's not realistic to it's not realistic to try to create a society or a system that will accomplish that, because you're always going to be running against nature. And again, even in smaller sizes, there are still health risk and hormonal issues that crop up even in obese and just morbidly obese individuals. There's still an effect on those people too. It's just less pronounced. So there are probably a lot of people that are just obese that feel depressed, likely because their hormones are off because they're obese. Whether it's a hormone like dopamine, whether it's a hormone like, estrogen, thyroid hormone, we talk about all these things. These things are not a light switch. You slowly shift away from what's ideal the further you get. And the worse it gets, the worse you feel. And the faster it hurts you, the bigger you are. When it comes to issues of weight, it is not black and white or light switches. It's always a gradient. So even in people who are just obese, you're still having problems. You're just not having as many problems as I have had in being super morbidly obese.
That is so important, right? Because it's like, well, if you're saying, okay, choose this other path, but where's that other path putting that person, and really thinking about that other person's situation? Like, I think it's really easy. I'll speak for myself. It's like someone with size privilege for me to be like, yeah, no, you don't need to diet. You don't need to lose weight. But there's nothing on the line for me for me to stop dieting. There's no, my experience at the healthcare practitioner doesn't change. I can still go to stores and put on clothes and, whatever store I want to go to. And that's not the case for everyone. And I think that leads to the second point of our conversation, which is how do intersectionality and bias play a role in our conversations around this? And what are your thoughts on when a provider holds more privilege than their client? How do you think they should be handling?
To translate for sane people, what do you think about a person that is thin advising a fat client? Let me just translate that.
Those conversations if they have a client that wants to lose weight.
Well, I think one, they shouldn't avoid the elephant in the room, that they are the person with the most privilege in the conversation. One, there's a power dynamic with being a practitioner in the first place, right? People come to see you, the expert. Two, I think that there's all different types of power dynamics, class, race, and our bias works.
Okay, so they're doing the fat acceptance thing of trying to throw everything in. We're getting to this algorithm 2010 YouTube video portion of the podcast.
We talk about how having access to the dominant language.
Hashtag class, hashtag race, hashtag gender, hashtag whatever, right? We got to just add it all in to get everybody involved, I guess.
And speaking the dominant language in your home and growing up with it is also a power dynamic. So I think that practitioners should own that dynamic and also allow the client to help curate their plan. This is their life plan, their goals, what they have for themselves. And you may have to still work with a client who wants to lose weight, who is fat and said, I want to lose weight. And I believe that does not mean that once they get to a weight.
So I want you guys to also acknowledge that these are social barriers to weight loss for fat people. Can you imagine going to a coach or something like a dietitian or anybody in these types of positions to help you? Can you imagine a person that views intentional weight loss as wrong And you may not even realize that they're that way. So what if they subtly sabotage your weight loss? This is a barrier to weight loss that I want people to be aware of, that in today's climate, fat people that go and look for help may be in a situation where the person that is helping them may even secretly want to sabotage them. So if you are a fat person that is trying to lose weight, I will tell you, be aware of the language that they use. Be aware of these types of things. Always go with a critical eye and just make sure that they're not sabotaging your efforts. And if they are, then find somebody else, because I would be very wary. I don't like this. I'll covertly disagree with your goal. I would rather somebody tell me flat out that losing weight is wrong, because then I can know to fire them immediately and go somewhere else. But I think these people are disingenuous and sharks, and they want to still take your money while maybe possibly subtly sabotaging your efforts, which fat sabotage, weight loss sabotage is such an issue in and of itself. I definitely want to talk about on this channel. But to have it happen in an institutional level is very scary and very unfortunate and wrong. So thanks, you guys, for creating another barrier.
Loss goal that they still won't have some body image issues. And so as any of your body, whether you gain weight or lose weight, you as a practitioner have to help them navigate that. And so when I say that as an expert, I know I'm the same person who tells you guys that you're the student, but they're coming there for advice for you. And I have to say that in this way because I found that sometimes people are carrying shame when they are in the position of power, like fear of saying the wrong thing. Or I always, say this to like white people, like, I know you were a white therapist before I clicked on this. Like, I knew you were white. And so if I didn't think that you didn't have a skill, I wouldn't be there. And I can say the same thing for a thin Black woman, right? Or a cisgendered male, whatever the dynamic is. I'm coming to you because I believe that you can help me. So help me and don't get caught up in your privilege, because that is what racism looks like, transphobia looks like, ableism looks like. You're hindering my ability to thrive because you're stuck on your privilege. And that in itself is harmful.
Yeah. So when you say stuck on your privilege, like, how does that look for people who are listening, just to get a little bit more specific?
Oh, I could give a clear example. Like earlier this year, well, probably a couple months ago, I had a white therapist, and there was a shooting in Jacksonville, Florida, where I went to college, which is an hour and a half away from my home. And a white man went inside of the Dollar Tree or the Family Dollar and killed 3 Black people who are in the same age range as me. And
so I just have to say, as a disclaimer, I will let her finish this, but a reminder to everybody in the world and the audience, weight and race are not similar at all. Okay, let's continue.
So it could have been me, right? Like, it just could have been. And I kept trying to talk about it, and she kept saying, how's work? She was avoidant. And that is a behavior that I find that people in privilege, they avoid it. They're scared to ask a question, they're afraid that they're going to be offensive. But it's even more offensive that you are accepting clients who look like me and you're uncomfortable with talking about race. At this point, you should say, this is my expertise with people I probably can't even help you. And that is my life. I cannot separate Blackness from anything I do in my life. And a lot of other clients, like, I go to trans workshops to hear about trans people's experience and what their needs are. And I learned the moment you avoid that this person is trans, you've already diminished their whole entire life experience. And you're not going to be able to help them until you really take the time to understand that and be brave enough to ask the questions, be bold enough to say, I know what I'm doing. I'm not all knowing, but I know enough to say, hey, I may not have all the answers, but if you trust me enough, I will help us get there. And that's okay. That opens the door.
Yeah, something I've been thinking a lot about, and thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing your personal story. Something I've been thinking a lot about is how coaching in general can be a really good facilitator of those conversations, because you're not giving advice. You're asking questions to understand the person's worldview, to understand their experience.
You're not giving advice. Then what the heck are you even doing as a coach?
And to...
Can you imagine paying this woman? I just cannot.
To be able to then honor that and hold space for whatever is there for them. And I think that that's where I see coaching being like a really useful tool in the facilitation of conversations.
I mean, my honest opinion on this is that if you have zero experience with something whatsoever, so regardless of if it's race, trans, fatness, whatever, just don't act like you're an expert on something if you don't necessarily know. Now, if you've grown up around tons of Black people your whole life, or if you've been fat before, or if everybody in your family is super fat and you've been around it all the time, like, don't act as if your own brain or mind cannot see something or cannot understand something, but just be aware of what you know about and what you don't. You know, I try my best on this channel to not talk about trans issues because I do not understand it. I just don't. And I may never understand it. And that's just a reality. You know, I can try to, but I'm not going to comment on it. That's why I typically don't, because I have a very hard time. I don't know if it has to do with my experience of being an incredibly feminine man. I just cannot understand wanting to transition or any of these things. I've been pressured to transition before. It's just something that I just cannot understand. It's something that I've never had an issue with being male, for example. It's something I really, really don't understand. I try to have empathy for those that truly have gender dysphoria. I try, but it's something that I'll probably always struggle with, maybe because it's similar to my experience or it's too close to my experience where it's like I can't quite understand it. And I don't have a lot of experience with trans people and these types of things, so I don't talk about it, not because I hate anybody who's trans. I don't, but I don't understand it. So I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on it. And I think that is dumb, right? So whereas when it comes to like Black people, for example, I had so many friends who are Black growing up, and I'm very well versed, you know, not in everything ever, right? But it's like, I don't know, this is weird to say, but it's just, online world is so weird, right? I know how incredibly normal Black people are. You know, I think people who have never had experience with Black people, they see Black people as like so different or something. And it's just like, not, like, people are not that different. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just like, so that's kind of my thing. Like, if you've never been around a gay person in your whole life and you don't understand it at all, just don't act like you're an expert on it, you know, and don't act like you know more about it than somebody else, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Like, that being said, you can still comment on it. Like, I would never tell a straight person they cannot comment on gay issues or they cannot share their opinion on it. But perhaps as a gay person, I may know more about it, or I may have something to add to the discussion that you may not have considered, which is fine. But it's like, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and let's just be okay and not weird. Okay, like, people are people, you know? Just let it be. People are people. That's all.
There is a different power dynamic, or there are different, you know, identities between the provider and the client, because it's when you go into this mode of like, I feel like I have to give advice, that things get tricky, because that's where you can run into a situation where you're perhaps suggesting something that isn't going to land because you're coming at it from a place that you're maybe saying it in a way that you're not acknowledging your privilege, or you're not even seeing how privilege plays into it.
And thank you, Summer. And using the example of my therapist, and you brought up something like you're asking questions. My therapist could have talked to me about self-care. She could have asked me questions about how does it feel? Just generally, how does it feel? And be honest and say, I could never imagine, after I say, I don't ask you that because I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, just genuinely say, I want to give you this space to say your real feelings and without holding back. And even if the thing that, that your client is saying is going to offend you.
I have to also reiterate that weight is not similar to this dynamic at all. When it comes to weight, anybody has a capacity to become obese or to lose weight, pretty much, okay? I don't have the capacity to become a biological woman. I don't have the capacity to become Black. I don't have the capacity to become straight, right? I don't have the capacity to do these things. So that's really more so where these conversations can be had, and I try to always consider the female perspective in weight loss. I have a lot of friends who are female, obviously. So it's they can help me understand things about being overweight and your cycle and these types of things. And I try to consider all perspectives in that regard in terms of my, activism in terms of obesity. But that's why you just talk to people and engage with people that are different than you in these ways. And it's really not a big deal. And it's just very frustrating how they talk about this stuff because I think they're trying to make it less scary, but they kind of make it more scary. It's really not that big of a deal. Just don't judge people for stuff like that or stuff that they can't control. I don't know why that's so hard for people to understand. Now, weight is something you can control, so it's not similar. It's very different. So I do think there's a little bit more of a warrant of judgment when it comes to that, which I know a lot of people probably would not like to hear me say that, but it is true because it's not the same. So I don't like this conflation of the two different things. I think it's incredibly deceptive. Okay? And I think it really, really confuses the conversation because weight is not in this category. And that's why I constantly am trying to drill into you guys, this issue is not political. This issue is not identity. This issue, it has nothing to do with any of these things. It really, really, really doesn't. And I don't mind if you guys talk politics or whatever in the comments. I don't care. But I'm just saying that we got to separate this issue out of this because it's not productive at all. Is not similar. So yeah. So while it maybe you should listen to somebody who has been super morbidly obese, right? Just to try to understand it. If you haven't been, you still have to take, I will say as somebody who is super morbidly obese, you have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt. If somebody who's super fat is telling you that they do not eat that much, they are probably lying. And again, we never acknowledge that BED, one of the symptoms of it is that you lie about how much you eat or you try to hide how much you're eating. So you can't necessarily trust that. And that's tough, but I'm hey, I'm here. I'm the fat ass in the room that will be honest and can tell you, hey, don't listen to somebody if they say they're not eating that much. They're lying. Now when it comes to losing the weight, that can be a different conversation because there can be hormonal problems within losing weight as a super fat person. But if somebody is consistently gaining, they are absolutely eating in excess of calories. Because even from a hormonal perspective, you will usually be able to maintain the vast majority of the time, unless if there's a real hormonal crisis, which would be incredibly obvious to a doctor. and they would be working to fix that pretty much immediately. Any long-term chronic issues, the weight gain is either incredibly slow or you're having an issue losing the weight because you're too hungry. That's what it is. So it's like, it's a difficult issue to unpack. And that's why I get so frustrated, because most of the time people talk about obesity, they talk about all this other stuff. People don't want to just talk about obesity. And I feel like I'm screaming here sometimes, like, just talk about the effing issue. Please. Please. It drives me insane sometimes.
That moment, is not their job to process your feelings. For example, I have had several therapists where I've had to, the power dynamic where I've had to explain to them fat phobia, and I'm spending my entire session explaining fat phobia. They keep asking me questions. So can you tell me more about like fat phobia? No, that's not what needs to happen. You need to ask me, how does it make me feel? When is the first time I've experienced that? Do I have safe spaces where I feel that, well, those things don't happen, where I'm not experiencing those things? How can I curate that type of environment? When it comes to police shootings or violent crimes against Black and brown people, or, or women, sometimes when things are in the mainstream media, there is no real safe space. So you might have to talk to your client about shutting down the social media. There's different tactics that we talk about in our course that help with power dynamics. That's what's so good about this thing too, Summer. Like, our program is people get to role play.
And we want people to be go-to experts on body image. And I think that having these skills and having this knowledge will help you confidently be able to say that. And I think that it's not just about like how we are in a session with a client too. It's about how we are positioning ourselves outwardly too. So like the way your social media looks, the way your website looks, and all of that stuff. And I feel like we sort of went on a bit of a tangent there, but I feel like it's an important part of the conversation.
Definitely a tangent and not very relevant at all. As I will say again, race and weight are not the same. They're not similar, okay? Let's see if there's anything else to cover, or if they're going to shift to the next topic, because we won't cover that.
Because I think that if you want people to come to you and to be able to trust you, you can't just do it on the basis of like, well, I took this course, so therefore you can trust me. It's like you actually have to sort of be, really invested in body liberation and show that through your commitment, whether that be like having seating that's going to be accommodating to fat people.
I think that's good advice, especially if you're working directly with very fat people. You should have seating. For example, spaces that are dedicated to helping fat people should absolutely have that. I agree.
Having, things on your website that have where you're talking about like who your teachers were or about these issues and so on and so forth. So it's not just about like the conversation in the room. It's also about your commitment to allyship as well. And I'm not saying I'm
sorry. That term is so sorry. It just I'm just going to say it. That term is gay. Okay, it's very gay to me. Okay, I think we're good though. I think we've covered enough of this. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've told you guys I like offensive humor in this kind of stuff, and I want to bring humor back to certain things in life. I'm so sick of everything being serious. I don't know if it's my brain, if it's a part of my recovery, if it's because I'm gaining proximity to not being super morbidly obese, but I want to have more fun in life. So yeah, I'm going to push for that too. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was good and entertaining and educating and etc. I will be back very soon. Please subscribe if you liked it, and leave a comment below. Thank you so much. Talk soon. Bye.